From the Edge of the Web studios, here's what we're looking at this week.
All right, so welcome to Edge of the Web podcast, the bonus podcast for episode 358. This is the Site Strategics Digital Marketing News Desk, and we're focused on news this and every week here, Digital Marketing News. I'm your host, Aaron Sparks. Joining me online to take a gander at this news is Greg Finn of Cypress North. Greg, how you doing, sir?
Aaron, I'm doing fantastic. Pleasure and honor to be with you, and I'm ready to gander.
Fantastic, Ben. It's great to have you on board. We've been wanting to get you on here for a while, so the moment arrived, and now we're going to dig in and geek out on PPC. But first, let's look at our first article here over from Search Engine Journal from Montti. Google explains which pages should be removed. So Google's John Mueller, he was actually on to identify pages to block. He actually explains why low traffic pages are okay. And in the Google Webmaster Hangout, Google's John Mueller actually answered which low page traffic to no index and which not to worry about. So why would we want to actually no index anything? That's the first and foremost question. The question is, are low traffic pages actually harmful? You know, it's generally understood that it's a good idea to remove low performing pages. Low quality pages tend to attract low amounts of traffic and should either be re-indexed or no indexed or removed entirely. So they actually posed that question to John. So his response, basically, the question was, we're publishing news articles. For example, we have 100 new articles every day, and 10 of them give 95% of the organic search traffic, another 90 go nowhere. We're afraid that Google can decide our website is interesting only for 10% of the audience. So there's an idea. Is there an idea to hide some of the boring local news under a no index to make an overall quality of all publishing content better? What do you think? So he says, in general, we do look at the content on a per page basis, and we also try to understand the site on an overall basis to understand how well the site is working. This is something that users appreciate. If everything is essentially working the way that it should be working, well, so it's not completely out of question to think about all of your content and to think about what you really want to have indexed. So he basically was stating that the traffic isn't necessarily a metric to use when judging whether a news web page is low quality or not. So, Greg, what do you think about the response that Google's giving here? Is, I mean, if it's commonly known that we should probably preen away and no index some of these low quality pages, Google's really saying the opposite here, right?
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, you look at this response and you think, this is sort of not answering anything here. But when you dive into it, it's an impossible question to answer.
That's right.
In broad strokes like that. And I think John did something that we need a little bit more of. He doesn't have this black and white, binary response here. He's saying that it's going to depend a little bit on the quality of those articles, and so I love the approach where he says you can have articles that are still actually correct, that can help people. They just might not be that popular. And is that a detriment? No, it's not a detriment. So one of the examples when he was talking about it with some of the user-generated stuff, I think that's an interesting can of worms to open up when you're looking, and he said maybe some of your writers have this art, is I believe how he had called it. And those folks, they shouldn't be penalized because you've got some other authors on your site that just aren't putting out the same quality content. So it's a really hard answer. And anybody at Google that gives an answer, there's people are just going to take it and run with it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I love the fact that he leaves it open, but talks about it, that just because it isn't overwhelming your analytics package with traffic doesn't mean that it's not something that's important, and doesn't mean you should no index it.
And that goes into the concept of entities and relationships of entities as well. Hear me out here. Is that just because it's popular for a particular slice in time, right, doesn't mean that it doesn't have any value, especially whenever you have link association that helps the user understand a topic better. It's not about the trove of users and user traffic that should justify a page either existing or not. It's really about how connected and the value of the two pieces of content and how they relate to each other. So Yeah, he can't. There's no way that you could judge a piece of content just on traffic merit, because the relationship is really what they're trying to insist upon is how valuable that content is for that user, and it's got to be a one-to-one, a singular type of perspective, not a group think or a topical scenario where there's a trending particular topic, right?
Yeah, and that's something that we look at too. You know, when we're looking at maybe we're going to be redirecting a site or we've got a new website coming, we'll look and say, well, hey, somebody that comes in this page, like, is the traffic there, right? That's an indicator. Now, people that get on the page and land, maybe it's not a huge volume there, but what if those folks are going through and converting?
Right.
Like, that is also super valuable. And then kind of lastly is that human grade that will give something and say, now, is this content helpful and is it accurate? You know, if you've got something talking about setting up an AdWords account from 2012 and you're walking through it, that's something that you can just let probably die off, you know. But I think looking at it not only from a traffic standpoint, but from a helpful standpoint, a lot of times that'll show up in conversions.
Very good, very good. Well, something that is also interesting about the concept of dropping off, changing over to search engine land from let's see here, what they were talking about here, and this is something that we've been talking about for a while here, is regarding AMP. Will publishers drop AMP when it's no longer a requirement for top stories? Yeah, pardon me. With a recent announcement that Google plans to lift the AMP requirement beginning in 2021, publishers are reevaluating whether their resources are better spent optimizing their mobile experiences to be eligible to appear in the top stories without AMP, or if it's just easier to continue maintaining AMP versions of their page. So there was an announcement here just recently. And when was that done? Let's see here. The announcement was May 28th, actually, that AMP will not be required for top stories. And I think this was also in context of COVID and how Google's trying to open up some of the restrictions to be able to have organizations be able to move their content, more fresh content, relevant content, and not have restricted factors regarding AMP. So AMP, if you don't know what AMP is, Accelerated Mobile Pages, and it has a history for about 4 years now, and there's been a lot of contention around why we're using such a streamlined mobile version. It's for speed, but it also is on the Google's content network, and we didn't have nearly as much control over the visuals, the aesthetic of these pages. But you were getting rewarded, and one of those was actually being in the top stories element, as well as Google Carousel and the like. So now removing this, does that actually bode well for AMP? What's the future of AMP? So what are your thoughts there, Greg, regarding AMP maybe as the concept, and then this particular decision from Google removing these requirements?
Well, I just said that we shouldn't have so many binary feelings on some of these topics, but I'm as binary as can be on this. I dislike AMP immensely. And we work with some publishers where, with AMP, you can get pretty close to the experience you can give somebody on a mobile site,
right? But
you can't really get 100% there. The way that it's displayed just never matches up to how detailed you can be from the mobile web. And there's all sorts of problems that have just plagued AMP, especially when it first started up, trying to copy and share things. There's a problem. People were sending out traffic to Google. I still I'm not a fan of it from the experience. I get it that it loads faster.
Right.
And I think in some areas, especially maybe some underserved or areas with poor connectivity, it could make sense. But for me, I like the fact and the freedom of having one website that you create to do whatever you want. You're not beholden to anyone else. And, you're building it the way you want. So for me, I couldn't be happier that Google is giving other publishers, and maybe even it's some local news. Maybe it's a local news outlet that simply doesn't have the development capacity to implement AMP correctly.
Right.
And now that they're not going to show up in top stories. Well, I don't like that. So I really do like this change that Google is making.
Absolutely. And we have been on the fence for the longest time regarding AMP, and that it just removes so much control. And on top of it, you're not in control of your sandbox anymore. You're absolutely right, is that we want to be able to control conversions, control experience. And it just seemed that more and more we were allowing our control to sift away just because we were supposed to play in the Google sandbox, right? So there could very well still be some factors there. They have explicitly said that AMP does not affect SEO, right? Which I would probably I could probably pull up a number of SEO authorities that would probably counter that particular response. But at the same time, you're right, is that there shouldn't be a punishment if a local news organization can't actually roll out hundreds of AMP stories along with their regular broadcast of content. So,
yeah, and while they say it's not a factor in SEO, obviously anything that shows up in the search engine results pages does help that experience, right? And if you see that little lightning bolt and you click through, yes, that's not an intrinsic ranking factor, but that is something that may dictate the user experience and driving traffic to your site. Right. And one thing that I loved from that article that George Nguyen over at Search Engine Land put out is he asked Matthew Brown, who was a former director of search strategy at the New York Times, and he asked what they were going to be doing with AMP. And he said, for the publishers I've been working with, there's not a lot of upside left. And he went on to talk about the fact that many of the people doing it now still and using AMP on the publisher side is only for those top stories. So I think we'll really see the answer here coming soon.
Oh, wow. Good insight. All right. So lastly, we want to make sure that for everybody who's listening to the podcast as well as the interview podcast, always want to express thanks to our sponsor, Ahrefs. They continue to be a sponsor of Edge. Ahrefs makes competitive analysis very, very easy. Their tools show you how competitors are getting their traffic from Google and why. You can see pages, their content, the keywords they rank for, and much more. So if you're not getting significant search traffic, these tools are for you, whether you're an agency or freelancer or inside of a marketing department. Check out Ahrefs today, and they have a great 7 days for $7 intro program, and without any type of commitment, you can see all the tool sets that are in there. So check it out. Ahrefs.com, and you'll start swimming in great data like we do here at the shop. All right, so pivot around for our last article, and here's some exciting news. And you certainly you joined in the social chatter there over the weekend, Greg, from Search Engine Journal, from Susan Wenograd, friend of the show here. LinkedIn ads engagement remarketing for video and lead ads. So LinkedIn has actually announced a much anticipated targeting for its ads engagement retargeting options for lead ads and video views. So what's Susan talking about, Greg? What's happening here on the LinkedIn front?
So I think LinkedIn is making a really smart move here, where they are going to allow advertisers to remarket to folks that engaged within LinkedIn itself. So not going off of the site where we know that a lot of LinkedIn users like to stay, right. But you're going to be able to target folks that watched a specific portion of video, or if you opened a lead gen form or filled out a lead gen form. And I think, again, this is extra smart coming on the fact that we know we are going to be up against the third-party cookie problem here coming in 2021. Right. So they are going to allow targeting based off of actions taken on the site itself. And that's sort of step one of the announcement. And even hidden in there that I didn't hear a lot of buzz about was something that our folks that do all of our LinkedIn advertising were ecstatic about, was that you're now going to be able to target based off of when they engaged. So that was something that was really tricky before. You get people in these lists and these audiences, right, and then they were kind of there. So now you're going to be able to segment based off of whether they engaged 30 days in the past, 60 days in the past, 90 days, 180 days, all the way up to 365 days ago. Oh, wow. So it's going to be really important to say, hey, somebody 30 days, we need to get them back. We're going to be willing to pay a higher price. There you go. Pay a higher premium for that. Absolutely. So the larger story here is platform-specific remarketing and engagement based on the tools, the advertising
mediums that they have at that platform's disposal. Facebook's been doing it obviously for years, trying to stoke up this engagement space, but LinkedIn, the B2B side of things, has always been a bit behind in its adoption there. This is fantastic. We have to have these mediums start giving us the platform and the tools as we leave the third-party cookie realm, as we get into a space where, and for all of our users there, Google announced, or listeners, I should say, Google announced about mid-year last year that they were no longer going to be honoring any type of additional third-party cookies from advertising mediums. So essentially cutting off a good deal of the user experience from us. So we wouldn't be able to trigger different events based on user behavior, right? Is that safe to say there?
Yep. That they're going to put the privacy is going to be at the forefront.
Right.
So, where you could be cooking people based off of where they were, there's going to be a variety of new ways to implement retargeting. And a lot of this is going to be on the platform itself and interacting with those specific sites. And then the other thing that, we hear a lot is, and why I think this is a great move for LinkedIn, is that you hear LinkedIn, the cost of LinkedIn ads is high. The cost per click is high.
Right.
I mean, I'd argue that the value is also high there. But some of the ability to retarget based on video and how much people watched with this,
right.
People love staying on LinkedIn and will watch a video and keep on scrolling. And if you can hit somebody that watched 75% of a video within 30 days, I mean, that's gold. So I really, really like this move.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, we're going to be watching that and certainly bring our listeners any new developments there. This is fantastic, seeing the platforms really start to build up their intrinsic user engagement to a much larger degree. So there's the news articles for this week. We want to shift over to a Google update for all of you. This is June 8th. 2020, and we're doing an update as consistently as we can when we're looking at the Google algorithm updates and any type of choppy waters. So there was some social chatter at the beginning of June. An increased volatility in search engines was actually clocked by SEMrush, its sensor, at the beginning of June. There's no official statement from Google that has been made regarding this potential update. You see a little bit of a pop there, but now over the last few days, we are in way, in fact, it's the lowest amount of risk and volatility here in the last 30 days. You can actually go back to 90 days, and we haven't had these scores before. So SEMrush there is on screen. You can certainly see that we're in the nice calm 40 point volatility there. Over on Moz, we've got a nice 79-degree weather pattern. It's a little bit better than the weather we had over the weekend. But I'm talking real weather, not digital weather. But hey, check it out, is that everything is getting a good deal more calmer, especially since the end of May also showed a series of algorithm changes. Over on cognitive, you can also see there was some volatility in June, but we're pretty even right now. And lastly, on Rank Ranger, you can also see that we are also experiencing a really low amount of volatility right now. So should we be ready for another round of updates? The chatter was of the opinion that potentially the June 1st volatility was a second round of the Google Core algorithm update that initially got launched May 4th. Greg, any thoughts about the choppy waters that were here in the last 30 days? Are we getting a breath of fresh air, or at least calm seas?
I mean, the past 30 days has been tumultuous waters, but this past week has been nice. Looking at those charts there. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those. You have a plan in place, look at what's happened here in May and adapt, and then look towards page experience and what's coming in the future.
Beautiful. Well said, sir. All right, so that's the end of the Edge News this week. Be sure to check out our full interview with Greg Finn. Link to this podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we go live each and every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And from all of us over at The Edge, we thank you very much. Stay safe, be well, and do not be a piece of cyber driftwood. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.